Buried deeper than any known tomb, beneath layers of power, ritual, and stone, there exists a chamber even the church refused to speak of. That silence lasted 5,000 years, until now. What emerged from that sealed vault isn't just ancient, it's unsettling. From forgotten relics tied to civilizations lost to time, to records that suggest we've misunderstood the origins of humanity itself, this discovery has sent tremors through religion, academia, and geopolitics. The question isn't just what was found, but why it was hidden, and who wanted it that way. A door meant to stay shut, unearthed beneath Vatican Hill. It started quietly, as these things do. In early 2025, workers repairing foundation damage beneath the Vatican Library noticed something strange on the scanners. A chamber dense enough to distort sonar, buried deeper than the usual crypts or archives. The excavation team expected another forgotten catacomb. What they found was not that. A vault, sealed tight, reinforced with an alloy no metallurgist could identify, was hidden beneath a corridor no record mentioned. No Christian symbols adorned the entrance. Instead, it was carved with markings reminiscent of Mesopotamian seals and ancient Etruscan pictographs, symbols that predate Rome itself. The implication? The site was sacred, long before Christianity took root. Historians were stunned. The church said nothing. Some suggest it wasn't an oversight, it was erased. Sumerian writings in the heart of the Vatican? Inside the vault lay hundreds of objects, but none more confounding than the tablets. Clay, brittle, and covered in cuneiform. Sumerian, unmistakably. One fragment even named a place called the Gate of the Fallen Sky Gods, a term fringe theorists pounced on, though even conservative scholars couldn't explain how Sumerian relics ended up beneath Vatican Hill. Were they stolen, or gifted, or perhaps kept hidden deliberately by those who feared the competing version of history these tablets might tell? Theories bloomed like wildfire. Secret trades between empires. Suppressed knowledge passed down in shadows. Or worse, evidence of a forgotten age where gods, or something like them, walked the earth. The giant that shouldn't exist. Then came the bones. A skeleton, roughly 12 feet long, was found near the chamber's far wall, partially entombed in black resin. It wasn't just the size that defied belief, but the shape. Elongated limbs, anomalous cranial features. Human? Not quite. And next to the skull, inscribed in ancient Hebrew, were the words, "They walked with the Watchers." To those familiar with apocryphal texts, that phrase is chilling. The Watchers are angels who fell, being said to have fathered the Nephilim, half-divine giants exiled from heaven. The church dismissed it all, of course. They called it an evolutionary outlier, a curiosity, but no further information was released. The Scroll of Night, a forbidden Genesis. Among the most controversial finds was a scroll sealed inside an obsidian box. It was charred but intact, written in a script blending early Aramaic with Proto-Hebrew. Scholars called it the Scroll of Night. The text flips everything. In it, Lucifer isn't a rebel, but a liberator, bringing light to a species kept in ignorance by higher beings jealous of human potential. It also speaks of sky chariots and flame beings who descended to teach humans medicine, astronomy, and even language. The Vatican immediately restricted access, labeling it heretical and destabilizing. Some believe this document predates any known scripture. And that's exactly why it terrifies the church. The cross before Christ. In the corner of the chamber was something simple. A stone slab untouched by time, etched with a cross. But carbon analysis showed it was created nearly 3,000 years before Christianity. Ancient cultures, like the Celts, Persians, and early Indo-Europeans, used similar symbols to represent balance, seasons, or celestial motion. Could Christianity have co-opted a much older symbol, one that once meant something universal? The church won't say, but now historians are asking, was the crucifix ever truly Christian, or just the latest face of a much older myth? The map to nowhere. Behind a rotting set of shelves, folded and tucked in a leather wrap, researchers found a map. Not in Europe. Not even of this world as we know it. The landmass was massive, far larger than modern continents, and seemed to sit where the Indian Ocean is now. In one corner, a faded Greek annotation reads, Land of Lemur, Lemuria, the mythical lost continent once proposed by 19th century geologists and ridiculed ever since. But this map was old, ancient, possibly older than any known navigational chart, and it wasn't drawn as fantasy. It bore ports, rivers, elevations, all marked in detail. What if Lemuria wasn't a myth? What if the Vatican has known about it all along? The relics that shouldn't work but do. Tucked inside a stone coffer were several items. A small sphere that hovered slightly above the surface when placed on marble, a blade dull by appearance but sharper than anything modern steel can match, and a pendant that, when held, triggered measurable electromagnetic pulses. The materials weren't just rare, they were impossible. Their molecular structure didn't match anything on record. Experts tried to explain it away. Advanced metallurgy, perhaps. Lost technology, maybe. But others whispered the unthinkable, that these were not of this world. The Vatican refused further testing. Independent labs were denied access, and any scientist who came forward was met with silence, or, in some cases, sudden career-ending scrutiny. DNA samples, preserved, forbidden, and deeply unsettling. Of all the finds inside the chamber, perhaps none felt more immediate, more viscerally strange than the vial. Labeled in faded Latin, Sanguis Altissimus, or Blood of the Highest. It sat nestled in a bed of ash, sealed within a crystal vessel and waxed shut with what might have been beeswax or something older. When scientists managed to extract a sample briefly before the Vatican halted testing, the results were jarring. The DNA inside didn't quite match ours, not even close. An 8% deviation from modern human genetics. For context, Neanderthals differ from us by roughly 2%. This wasn't just another branch on the family tree, it looked like a different tree entirely. Some whispered it could be the blood of an ancient extinct hominid. Others, more provocatively, floated the idea of tampering, genetic manipulation, ancient hybridization, or even contact with something not from Earth. The Church issued a sharp statement, calling the sample symbolic, not scientific. But the sample was pulled, the lab was locked, and that was the end of it, officially. The keys of Solomon and the pages they tried to burn. Tucked in the driest section of the vault were scrolls, crumbling, brittle, and stamped with symbols that practically buzzed off the page. When decoded, they matched elements of the Lemegeton, or the Lesser Key of Solomon, a grimoire most had assumed, lost to myth or medieval paranoia. But this was older, and far more detailed. Written in a hybrid of Latin, Koine Greek, and Enochian, the so-called language of angels, the texts laid out rituals. Summoning, binding, transmutation. One passage referenced the crownless ones. Another described a ritual requiring sound, shadow, and copper mirrors. Many pages had burn marks as though someone tried, too late, to destroy them. Why would the Church preserve these, or even protect them? Some scholars suggest control. Keep the knowledge, deny it to others, and label all who seek it heretics. It's a dangerous monopoly, guarding not just sacred scripture, but also forbidden science and outlawed mysticism, prayer and spell, liturgy and incantation. Suddenly, they seem less like opposites. Maybe they never were. The chamber that listens back. Near the vault's center was a room with no ornamentation, just stone, but when a technician spoke, barely above a whisper, it echoed perfectly across the dome. No amplification, no distortion, just eerie clarity. Engineers who studied the acoustics were baffled. Every curve and corner of the chamber appeared tuned with surgical precision, channeling sound like a living amplifier. But it went further. When specific tones were sung or chanted, volunteers experienced measurable changes in brainwave activity. Alpha, theta. Some described a sense of floating. Others, lucid memories not their own. What was this room? A sanctuary? A tool? A weapon? The church called it a quiet zone, but scientists who visited it once have not been invited back. Prophecies etched in bronze and disturbingly accurate. In the deepest vault lay a set of bronze tablets, so oxidized they looked centuries beyond salvage. But etched beneath the corrosion were verses, prophetic ones, written in a mix of archaic Latin and early Greek. The lines were vague, but eerily specific. Fire shall consume the city of porcelain men. The towers shall fall, pierced by iron birds. In the shadow of the fourth turning, the machine shall speak in every tongue. World War II, 9/11, AI and the rise of neural language models. The dates don't match modern reckoning, but the references are difficult to ignore. One final verse, only partially translated, ends with this. In silence, the fourth storm waits. Not fire, not flood, but knowing. Skeptics cry hoax, but radiocarbon tests put the tablets near 100 BCE. Even now, no one's quite sure what to make of them. But if the Vatican knew of these visions, did they warn anyone? Or did they simply watch? Vatican response. Stonewalling and soft denials. Once whispers leaked, the Vatican acted swiftly. A terse statement was issued. The items held no theological relevance and were misinterpreted historical remnants. The vault was resealed, access revoked. Researchers silenced by sweeping non-disclosure agreements. Some artifacts, according to one anonymous source, were relocated to a secure facility in Switzerland, allegedly under Jesuit oversight. No photos, no data, just silence. But that silence has done little to settle nerves. If there's nothing to hide, why the secrecy? The clearer the pattern becomes, the more people are beginning to ask, has the church been curating history, not preserving it? If these relics call into question the roots of faith, origin, and divine authority, then burying them was never about protection. It was about control. Maybe it still is. For centuries, the Vatican stood as a beacon of divine tradition, a spiritual anchor for billions. But deep below its marble sanctuaries lies something old, something stranger, a truth too complex for sermons.